Hello, this is Brian P., and welcome to Scaling the Well. So, for those of you who don't know, you can listen to me on iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at Scaling the Well. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at Scaling the Well Podcast. So, today, I thought I would do a short podcast about stemming off of something that happened this morning. And I was thinking about doing this topic for a while, but people think it's negative, and it has a negative connotation to it. But let me start with just a little story of what happened. So I was sitting there with a supervisor. Yes, I still have a supervisor, and my supervisor, she's really cool, and she was just like, kind of like we were just chit chatting, about the talk shop, and she was saying, "So," and I was like, "So," and she's like, "So you're interviewing?" I'm like, "You interviewing for what?" you know. And so, to make a long story short, there is a promotional opportunity that's been out for the last maybe a few weeks or so, and I think there's actually a few positions, but apparently they're doing interviews for that at least one of those positions beginning next week, and I'm up for it. I qualify for it, and so do a lot of my counterparts. But no, they did not call me for an interview, and so I was like, no. I didn't even know they were doing interviews. And I said, no, I'm not. I haven't been called for an interview. And she's like, oh, and then she has to walk it back. And honestly, I personally wasn't that disappointed, and I'll get into, and that's kind of like the crux of this podcast. But just to finish up this story, she was a little bit embarrassed. It's kind of like, congratulating a woman on being pregnant, but you find out she just has a big gut. And you'd have to walk it back like, oh, well, oh, wow. No, it's not your gut. It's just you have that glow of a pregnant woman, and then that's what my supervisors kind of do. Oh, I thought, you were a shoo-in. And to be honest, she probably did think I was a shoo-in. Why else would she kind of take that risk? She automatically assumed that I would be one of the people chosen to interview. But the point of this podcast is that why wasn't I disappointed? A lot of people would be like, oh, I didn't even know they were doing interviews. I wasn't called. Oh man, do they think all these people are better than me or whatever? And no. And first of all, I have a great position. I love what I'm doing, and it's something that that I'm in a position where I'm not like desperate to get out of. I'm in a really good spot, but it's always nice for somebody to think that you're ready for a higher level. Whether that's financially, responsibility wise or whatever. But I have, and I've had this since I was a child, what I've called, what worst case scenario thinking, what the world at large calls pessimism. And even my mother would accuse me of being pessimistic. And she said that's one of the issues she had with my father. May he rest in peace. But he was always very pessimistic. And she said it was, my mom's a very optimistic type of person. And I mean, she's a 4'11" white lady who adopted 2 black kids, so she's super optimistic about things just working out, and that's good for me, right? And I'm not saying that optimism is bad, but what I am saying is that pessimism gets a bad rap. And what I want you to take away from this podcast is that everyone should have a healthy dose of pessimism. So let's just kind of look at the differences between pessimists and optimists. Again, I call it worst case scenario thinking, and we'll go into a little bit of that later. But pessimists, in my opinion, they're just better prepared. They look at multiple resolution options, or multiple resolutions in themselves. So it's very it's just, you're just better adapted to deal with situations with a healthy dose of pessimism. With optimism, they basically just live on faith a lot. And a lot of people, there's going to be a lot of very spiritual and religious people who be like, what's wrong with living on faith? I think faith is good to have as far as, a global assessment or a, just kind of an overall worldview. And, but when it comes to just tactical, practical, you want to be prepared for certain things. And, you want to, it's like the old saying, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And that's what pessimism will give you the ability to do, is to think in those directions. Also, pessimists are not going to be easily disappointed. Again, going back to this morning, I wasn't disappointed that I found out that there were job interviews being conducted that didn't involve me, because there's a lot of different variables that go into that. For one, do I even know if I would want that particular position? And that would depend on where I would be assigned. And, and also there's a lot of things as far as other things that I'm kind of planning, because what worst case scenario thinking, pessimism, what it does for you is I don't have a career path. I have career paths, and there's a lot of things that I have going on, and I'm really happy with my position. I'm not stressing to get out of it. So, and then there's you start thinking, it allows your empathy to come through, and it's not like sour grapes, but it's actually, sweet grapes, because everybody who's up for that position is a colleague and a friend of mine. So it's not like I would be unhappy for anyone of the people who I think are up for that position to get it. So it's still a good scenario. And again, I'm not disappointed, because I didn't think that it's not like you don't have the confidence. I have the confidence in my skills. I have the confidence in my ability to do the job. But do what that doesn't. I know that those are the things I can control. The other things I can't control, and the things that I can't control, I can prepare for. And how do you prepare for that? Is by having a multi-pronged approach to upward mobility, and that goes for jobs. That goes for just your overall life goals when you're dealing from a position of lifestyle. Sometimes it can even go for relationships, Now, hopefully you're not in a relationship where you're already planning an exit and you have an exit strategy. I think then you're going like too much into the pessimistic part, but, you should always look at that things that could happen could not go your way. And that's, if you're really, really, so let's look at an optimist, right? An optimist says, I have a job opportunity, and they're betting everything on it, and they're putting all their eggs in one basket because they're so optimistic, and then if it doesn't come through, they're actually worse off than if they didn't even apply, because they were counting on it. They're already telling people about it. Maybe they've made financial arrangements based on the fact that they were going to get this position. I didn't do anything of that. You know what I did? When I started even thinking about promoting or getting another position, I started researching many positions. I started researching many options, inside and outside of my organization. What kind of things would I like to do? What type of things were I interested in? Also, and we'll do this in another podcast too, the best time to look for a job, or the best time to look for a promotion or anything, when you're talking about a career change, is when you're doing well. So because I have that attitude, you never want to be desperate to get out of a position, because once you're desperate, that's when you get stuck. That's when people smell the desperation on you. And I'll go in a little bit later talking, in another podcast, talking about how you have to make peace with your current status in order to move on. It's kind of like when someone dies, you gotta make peace with it before you move on. But, it's so because I have that attitude of when I start looking for advancement when I'm kind of doing well, before I get burnt out, before I get desperate, before I get a horrible supervisor or something like that. If when I don't get it, it's not like I'm losing anything. I'm still in a good spot, and I'm gonna still have a good attitude to where I look for multiple things, you know. So and I don't put all my eggs in one basket. So an optimist, you know, might just not assume things are going to get worse ever, and then they stay in a position too long. And then when they're really desperate to get off, or when they're about to have layoffs because we have a downturn in the economy or whatever, then they start really hustling to look for jobs, and by then everyone's looking for a job, and then it's too late, you know. Then your competition's gone up, and the jobs have dried up. So it's just you get this double whammy. And I blame that on optimism. So I'm not telling you not to be optimistic. I'm just saying a healthy dose of pessimism can really save your butt. So, and then the third thing is that pessimists are just realists. That's what we are. If you really wanted to give us another name, it would be realists. We have a firm grasp on reality. And you know, we understand that there is going to be people out there who are going to want to help us, but we also understand that there's going to be people out there that are going to be haters, and there's people out there who are going to look at you as a competitor, and there's people out there who are just not good people at all, you know. And those people exist, and fortunately, and I'm optimistic enough to say that that's not the majority of people, you know, by far. But you have to prepare yourself to deal with one of those people if they cross your path. And so that's part of being prepared. And so there's a lot of people that, I can't believe what this person did to me. You know, I had a friend who, you know, got fired, or what we call failed on probation. Like, you know, well, actually had a couple friends, you know, you get like a certain amount of time that you're on probation, and they got failed. Like within the last like couple weeks, you know, before they were going to pass probation. And I think it was just out of spite because of their superior. And that's a horrible thing, but you got to prepare yourself to know that you're going to have to deal with people like that. And there's different ways to deal with them. And you don't want to wait till the last minute to deal with them. You want to deal with them the whole time, because again, you could be looking for other options. And don't put your eggs all in one basket. Being an optimist, thinking, yes, I have this horrible boss, this horrible manager, this horrible CEO, whatever, and things are just going to kind of work out because I'm just going to try to fly under the radar. It can work sometimes, but again, you're living on faith. So, and also being a realist, you know, your goals are going to be commensurate with what you're good at, and what you're able to do, and you're going to have a plan. You know, they say a goal without a plan is just a wish, right? So optimists, they might have goals, but they're not prepared. Therefore, they don't have a plan, and therefore it's not realistic, which means it's a wish. And so you can have a lot of wishes, you know. You know, it's kind of like saying, I'm going to, you know, I plan my retirement by winning the lottery. Well, theoretically, that's possible, but realistically, not so much. So, so those are the three things about being a pessimist versus an optimist. As far as some like another story, I had a friend, and she, and I see this happen a lot, and I've talked about this in my dating podcast. I think we were both about 25 or whatever, and she just she fell in love with this guy, and she moved with him because he wanted to start a business. And I don't even forget what kind of business it was, but he was going to start a business in I think it was Arizona. Yeah, I think it's but a remote part. It wasn't like a big city like Phoenix. It was some remote part of Arizona. And she moved out there with him, and left her support system behind, and left all her friends, all her family. Left her job. I mean, it wasn't a great job. Again, we were 25, so it wasn't like she was making a ton of money and had a ton of a commitment to the job. But but the stuff that she did have, she left. She broke her lease, which wasn't very smart because I think that went on her credit. And she moved out with this guy, and again, true love and all that. That's great, you know. But a little bit of pessimism probably could have helped her out, because what happened was is they moved out there. They were out there for 6 months, and his business didn't really get off the ground. It turns out he really wasn't that serious about the business in the first place, or either he wasn't that serious or he just didn't really know what he was doing. Maybe he was living off of a little bit of too much optimism himself. And so what happened is that when she got out there, months went by. I think they were staying with his cousin or something. Then the cousin, the cousin was married and wanted them to pay rent. They didn't have the money. She ended up working at, it was like a small grocery store or whatever, which is fine. Again, that's what people in their 20s do. But it never really materialized. And so she was kind of disappointed about that. And then now a year went by, and things were kind of still in the same thing. He was doing like a few odd jobs. The whole business thing is not even being talked about anymore. And she finds out one night that she like a lot of, and this is so cliche, right? So someone calls on his phone, or I think you text or call or something. But she saw the name on it, and it was a girl. and you know how the story ends, right? Like it turns out he's seen some other girl out there. And again, that happens to people when they're in their 20s, and they're not sure what they're doing with life. But my point is that and I don't even think that this guy, I wouldn't even say this guy's an evil, horrible person. But when you're living off optimism, and especially when two people are doing it, you're just kind of living off that, well, things are just going to work out, true love conquers all, blah, blah, blah. No, it doesn't. And if you tell them that at first, they think, oh, you're just being negative. Yeah, I'm a dude that's going to be negative because I'm thinking ahead. I'm thinking about the worst case scenario. And here's the thing. When I say think about the worst case scenario, that doesn't mean don't do it. It doesn't mean don't move out to Arizona. It just means contemplate what's the worst thing that could happen. And if you can deal with that, and if you have a plan to deal with that, then okay. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying, pessimism should keep you from doing what you want to do, right? They asked me to put an age on, like, when I market this podcast and I boost posts and do anything. They're like, what's the age range for this podcast? I said, 21 to 40, because I'm basically talking to adults. I'm not talking to teenagers. Teenagers, do what your parents say. But for the rest of you, do what you want to do, but try to think through it. And the different ways you think through it is to say, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? Will I be emotionally able to handle the worst thing that could happen? And after that, do I have a plan to recover from that worst thing happening? And if the answer is yes, yes, and yes, well, go for it if you still want to do it, And as far as, going back to this morning, we'll try to bring things full circle. This afternoon, I got an email about another position, same classification, and they may be interested in me in another business unit, and it's actually a sweeter assignment. Not saying I'm going to get it because I'm not super optimistic, but I have that healthy pessimism. But I'm optimistic in myself. I'm optimistic in my experience. I'm optimistic in my skills. I'm not saying don't have optimism. I think optimism is very important. But I think that nobody has to really be convinced to have optimism unless they're, clinically depressed. And then that's another show, and then we can talk about that. But yes, a little bit of pessimism in your life. That song, a little bit of Monica in my life. Yeah, a little bit of pessimism will do you right. Because I have that little bit of pessimism, I'm not putting all my eggs in that basket either. It was just like something cool that happened, and it just happened on the same day that I had the discussion with my supervisor in the morning. And again, I'm doing good, and I have a lot of irons in the fire, not just with my job, but outside my job, and in the podcast space and the marketing space, and and there's going to be some other business things and some sponsors that you're going to be hearing about pretty soon. So life's good, but pessimism, despite popular belief or contrary to popular belief, help make a lot of these things happen. And I'm not trying to make happy people unhappy. That's not my goal. My goal is to make people sharper and think about these things. Anybody who's starting a business has to think of the liabilities. That's one of the first things they teach you, when you're getting your MBA. You always have to think of what can you lose? Where you ever heard of a SWOT analysis? Your internal strengths and internal weaknesses, external opportunities, external threats. Do a SWOT analysis when it comes to almost anything in your life, and you will be okay. All right. This is a short one today, but I thought it would be a little bit humorous and a little bit funny. And thank you for listening. This is Brian P., and this has been Scaling the Well.